Yes, indeed. I'm a little off track. What's up, my dudes? We ain't on that Lipton tea today, boys. We got a little colder than the Rockies running through our veins. Make Supercross great again, you know what I'm saying, dog? So, as you probably seen from the title of this video, what the hell is Spencer on now, right? So, I know the title might sound kind of funny, but really it's trying to explain a bigger point, and I feel like I finally figured out the way to make my argument about this whole one-to-one scaling. You guys know what they've been doing with the recent RF tracks on MX Simulator. They've been making them more one-to-one scaling, you know, than we probably ever had before, at least since all the way back to like 2013 or some shit like that, right? Like they're making the jump smaller, they're making the finish line smaller, rolling off the jump faces, making the track more narrow, making the whoops smaller, rolling off the berms, doing all that kind of stuff. They kind of started doing that last year. You probably noticed that on quite a few tracks last year, but they're still doing it. They're still doing this. It's like this is their biggest thing that they're trying to do with these 2021 RF Supercross tracks. It's like that is the thing that is on the top of the priority list, is to try to make the tracks as one-to-one scaling as humanly possible, right? So, some of you guys might be thinking, well, duh, Spencer. I mean, duh, dude. It's a simulator, and they're trying to make a replica series. I mean, of course, Spencer. Why wouldn't they make the tracks exactly one-to-one scaling? Why wouldn't they do that, right? I know there's a lot of you guys that go down that sort of an opinion and that sort of a thought process, and I want to explain to you what you're really saying when you say that, right? This video is going out to all of those people that are on this one-to-one scaling bandwagon. You think the Pro RF tracks need to be made exactly one-to-one scaling to, you know, the size and scaling of the track is exactly one-to-one scaling to the size of the bike, right? To all of you guys that are on that bandwagon and thinking down that road, you do realize what you're basically saying by saying that is you're saying that MX Simulator is exactly like real life. I mean, I hate to break it to you, but that's literally the argument that you're making, because if it wasn't exactly like real life, why the hell would you want the tracks exactly 100%, you know, one-to-one scaling to real life? Why would you want that unless the game was exactly like real life, right? So, I know this is going to make a lot of you guys really, you're going to start thinking now, because this is the real shit right here, guys. Like, seriously, though, why would you want exactly 100%, you know, one-to-one scaling if MX Simulator was not 100% like real life dirt bike racing? It don't make any sense. And some of you guys might be thinking, well, Spencer, you know, haven't you been one of the biggest advocates talking about how realistic MX Simulator is? Yeah, I've been one of the biggest dudes pushing that whole thing, right? I've said multiple times before, let me let that beer come out real quick. MX Simulator is real life motocross in a virtual world, right? I've said that multiple times before. Yeah, it's like real life motocross in a virtual world, but it's not exact. It's not exactly 100% like real life. And you got to understand what I'm saying when I say that for this to even make sense, right? But to some of you guys that are thinking that, you know, you got this idea in your head that MX Simulator is exactly 100% like real life dirt bike racing, I don't even know what to tell you, bro. I really don't, because there is a plethora of different things in this game that that separates it from real life, right? There's so many different things that makes it, different from being exactly like real life Supercross racing. And a lot of you guys got to understand that when we start talking about this whole one-to-one scaling argument, right? You've got to understand that there's all these other different elements, because I feel like there's so many of you guys, it's just so easy to get that quick opinion like, well, of course the tracks need to be made exactly the same scaling to the bike to what real life would be, and all that type of shit. I feel like it's very easy for a lot of you guys that don't really understand the way this game works at a deep level to kind of have that opinion. But the real truth of the matter is this game is not as difficult as real life Supercross racing, just in general, just right off the bat, right? Like, this game does not have actual cushion to the dirt. You don't have actual granulars of dirt on the ground and like the bike kind of, how in real life where the tire kind of pushes through the dirt, and there's like this whole other different kind of vibe of a feeling when you're riding in real life than when you're playing a game like MX Simulator. I mean, granted, like, MX Simulator is probably the closest thing we've had to real life, but still, that doesn't mean it's exactly like real life. Okay, so the track that you just saw me on there was a random custom track that I had just come across in this game called Wind SX. All right. If you haven't checked that track out before, just go look it up on Google. Wind SX MX Simulator. Go download it, right? And here we are back on one of the latest RF replica tracks here. Okay. And that track that we were just on before, that was a perfect example of where I thought we would have been all the way in 2021 RF Supercross, right? With all the roads they went down with, advancing the scaling and the skill gap and everything to the tracks over the years, right? Like, this is not 2013 MX Simulator anymore. Like, it's just not. And it cracks me up when people act like you can just keep this small scaling, small, tight, tiny, super narrow. It cracks me up because this has never worked in this game, and it's never gonna work in this game. Once you start getting past that, back in the days when they had the more like one-to-one scaling type shit, like in 2011, 2012, 2013, right? That was all back before they had ever even push the game past that. So that was back when you had the slower dynos. That was back when not as many people, were into the game and stuff like that. But since they started advancing that scaling bigger than one-to-one, right, going into 2014, I mean, the rhythms that you can hit on some of those 2014 tracks are fucking awesome, bro. 2015, 2016 kind of went back down to more of a narrow vibe, but there was still a bunch of rhythms you could hit on in the 2016 tracks. Then they went to the 2017s and really started to amp up some of those tracks on 2017 are like that perfect anywhere from 1.3 to 1.5 to 1 scaling, right? That's what I would call about that perfect range to where it still feels realistic, but it fits the gameplay of the game better, right? Like, there's all these other elements like I was talking about before. There's no wind on MX Simulator. There's no injuries on MX Simulator, so you don't have the same fear level that you would have like in real life, trying to hit a certain jump in qualifying or hit a big rhythm or whatever. And like I say, there's no pushable dirt. The terrain deformation in this game is not like real life, hence the whole no cushion to the dirt side of everything, right? Let's go back to that track. I'll show it to you here again. Just wanted to kind of give you a little comparison here to what they're doing to what I think they should be doing. Pay attention to the size of the jumps, right? Pay attention to the size of the jumps, the scaling of everything, right? Forget about all this default-looking basic skybox going on here. Try to block that out, okay? Just pay attention to the track itself. The size of the whoops, the size of the jump faces, the size of the berms, right? The overall scaling, length of the lanes, all that type of shit. This is exactly precisely where I thought we would have been in 2021 Supercross. But instead, they have went backwards on the whole scaling thing, and they've just made everything smaller. They've made the main triple smaller. They made the finish line smaller. I mean, it's all you can do to not overjump one of those main triples or finish lines on any of those RF Supercross tracks in 2021. I mean, you literally have to get on the brakes before you come off of the jump face, or you will overjump all that, right? And this, to me, as soon as I got back on this Wind SX track right here, this to me just felt like MX Simulator. See, there's something whenever they try to make this smaller one-to-one scaling, it's like they try to cramp down the whole track inside of the stadium, and it makes it to where it feels to me like they can't get the jump transition and trajectories and the jump pitches to match the landings, right? So it doesn't feel like this smooth jumping in and out of transitions, in and out of down and, up and down landings and over jump faces and stuff like that. It feels like they've lost sight of that with these newer RF tracks. But if you get back on a track like this, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. And this is one of those things you got to ride on the track to know what I'm saying. You can't just be a kind of a halfway playing MX Simulator amateur dude. You're not going to understand any of this shit. That's the thing. This is another aspect of this that I feel like is so hard for some of you guys to realize, because just like in real life, right? If you took the whole population of people that ride dirt bikes in real life, how much of a percentage of that population do you really think would prefer to ride on an actual full-blown, AMA level Supercross track? How many of those people do you think would actually like to ride on that kind of a track, huh? I would guess very, very few. I would guess less than 1% of all of the people that ride real-life dirt bikes would rather ride on a full-blown, legit, gnarly-ass whoops, gnarly main triple, full-blown Supercross track like what Eli Tomac's riding on and Roxon's racing on, right? It's the same way with MX Simulator, and I feel like this is what tricks up RF a lot, and this is where you get a lot of those people that think that they prefer this one-to-one scaling shit, because it's made everything easier, right? It's made the whoops easier. It's made the jump skill gap easier. It's made every aspect of the tracks have become easier now that they've made it more like this one-to-one scaling. So what happens is all of your beginner riders, all of your amateur dudes on MX Simulator, even a bunch of your beginner 250 Pro dudes, trust me, they are going to prefer more of that one-to-one scaling. I consider it more of an amateur filling track for MX Simulator, a lot of these newer RF tracks, the way they do the scaling, but you're going to have way more people that prefer that because of the overall spectrum of the skill gap of the game. You're not going to have, just like in real life, the majority of people would rather ride on an amateur Supercross track than an actual full-blown professional Supercross track. I feel like what's happened with a lot of these modern day RF tracks is they've been so dead set focused on trying to make everything as hyper-realistic one-to-one scaling as they possibly can, to the point to where they're starting to lose the edge to the tracks, right? I feel like they've lost like 10% of the edge on the jump faces and the whoops and pretty much every aspect of the track. And what it does is it makes it to where I don't have the same fear level in the same, back in 2017 RF Supercross tracks, there's times where you'll come around a corner and it's like, that whoop section is there, right? You're like, you think about it all the way around the track, it's that big ass gnarly whoop section on 2017 Oakland, or, a lot of the other tracks in 2017, it's like you think about that whoop section, it's like, oh shit, dude, I'm gonna have to really be on the gas to get through this. I felt like the tracks back in the day before they started doing this one-to-one scaling shit is it forced you to, you couldn't half-ass your way through the track anywhere, right? Like if you wanted to go through the whoop section, you were going to have to go through the whoop section. Whereas nowadays, it just feels like you can go through the whoops pretty much any speed that you want to. There's no real like risk in having to, really get on the gas and stay on top of the whoops. It's just nowhere near like it used to be back in 2017. And it's the same way with the main Supercross triples, right? Like every time I hit a main Supercross triple now on an RF track, it just feels like I'm hitting some tiny ass little, little backyard triple or some tiny ass amateur Supercross track triple, and I'm over jumping the shit out of it without even trying to, right? They've lost all that, making the Supercross triples actually have that like fun factor and excitement when you pop up in the air off of hitting a main Supercross triple. It's just like I'm saying, it's just lost that 10% of that edge, fun factor, danger feeling to the tracks. I feel like that's one of the biggest things they have lost with this whole trying to be so focused on making everything one-to-one scaling, which then makes it feel more like, to me, like it's an amateur Supercross track versus a full-blown pro-level Supercross track in the game, right? What it feels like to me is it feels like these tracks are just made for everybody, right? It don't matter if you're an amateur, a beginner in the game, like you're going to be able to get through these newer RF tracks in the game. You're going to be able to get through the whoops pretty easily. You're going to be able to, get over the main Supercross triples pretty easily. You're going to be able to get around the track pretty damn easily, even when you're not a full-blown pro in the game. That's not how real-life AMA Supercross tracks are, dog. Like, that's not at all how they are. Trust me, I understand track scaling and skill gap. I have played this game more than I will ever want to admit. Trust me, dog. I understand how it works. I understand when something's like too difficult or not difficult enough. And the thing is it just feels to me more like these tracks are like catering to everybody now, right? No matter what kind of skill level you're at. And some of you guys might be thinking, well, that's a good thing, right? It's, kind of made for everybody. No, motherfucker, that's not a good thing, because these are supposed to be full-blown pro esport level, AMA replica Supercross tracks in the simulator. And that's the whole point. It doesn't feel like they're made specifically for that top 1 percentile of the full-blown pro player base of the game. It doesn't feel like it's made for that. It feels like it's just made for everybody, right? No matter what kind of skill level you're at, it's like they're making the tracks now to where anybody can get around the tracks. But in reality, you're actually going to get a more realistic experience with a slightly bigger than one-to-one scaling, because it's going to make it where you make everything a little bit more difficult in MX Simulator than it would be, because the game is naturally easier than real-life Supercross racing, like I said, and things are just different in a video game. Just like with the collisions of MX Simulator is not exactly like bar banging is in real life Supercross, right? You cannot bar bang on MX Simulator like they do in real life Supercross. You just can't. So when you make the tracks one-to-one scaling narrow on MX Simulator, right? Again, another thing, you can't turn your head in MX Simulator. You can't do a plethora of different things that you can do in real life. So why in the hell would you make the scaling and the width of the track exactly one-to-one scaling to the way it is in real life? That don't even make any logical sense at all. You boys have gotten so caught up in that. You've gotten so caught up in that, well, it's realistic because RF's doing it and it's a simulator, and so let's make it exactly one-to-one scaling, and I'm an amateur, so this track feels better than an actual full-blown pro track in the game, right? A lot of you boys, you're just so caught up in that, and it's really sad to see it, because the track scaling and the real skill gap and the real fun, normal feeling to the game is starting to get lost. I mean, with a lot of those more modern RF tracks, I swear to God, they've almost got the traction feeling like it's like damn near a concrete kind of vibe to the track. I mean, they're getting so much traction, so much friction to the dirt. Look how narrow this is. Like, what? Let me just get over here to this part of the track. I don't understand why they did not just carry these tough blocks a little bit further to the outside here. You can see where it looks like they should have been. See all that bare dirt to the left of the jump face right here. I mean, holy crap. That's the thing, though. That's what I'm saying. How can you expect to have the same width of a track in a video game, right, where the collision is not like it is in real life? It's not going to give you the same experience of real life Supercross racing if the game is not exactly like real life. You have to adjust the track scaling and width of the track and size of the jumps and all this kind of stuff. Size of the whoops, size of the finish line. You got to adjust all that shit to make it actually fit the game, because the game is not exactly like real life. Okay, so I hope I've conveyed that point of they're trying to make the tracks exactly like real life, one-to-one scaling to the bike, when the fact of the matter is the game is not exactly 100% like real life. So it's going to give you this feeling of, if you've really played this game long enough, it's going to give you the feeling of this shit feels more like an amateur Supercross track in this game than it does an actual full-blown proper scaling Supercross track like that Wind SX track that I was just riding on, right? Like this main triple right here, I mean, it's everything you can do not to overjump that. And even if you come up short on any of these main triples, you're not going to pop off the bike like you would coming up short on a Supercross triple in real life, right? They're also starting to lose that whole, like, what you would pop off on real life jumps and what you end up popping off on these one-to-one scaling RF tracks right here. They've gotten all out of balance with that, because whenever you're, like I say, it's not exactly like real life, so you're not going to pop off a shit if you make it that small one-to-one scaling to the bike. You're not going to pop off like you're supposed to. You're not going to have the risk of coming up short or over jumping something. You're not going to have the, loss of momentum when you mess up on a rhythm section or whatever. It's not going to be the equivalent to the way it would be in real life when you're making the tracks exactly one-to-one scaling. It just does not fit the game exactly to the game. You need to go ride on some of the whoops on some of the 2017 Supercross tracks, like 2017 Oakland RF track in the game. Those are some real ass whoops, man. Those are some whoops where you can tell they weren't just trying to make this smoothed off super one-to-one scaling. They made those whoops actually fit the skill gap of the game. Go to some of the rhythms on like fucking Seattle, some of those other tracks in 17, oh my God, man. There was actual rhythm skill gap to those tracks. And it's just, man, it's such a hard thing to explain. It really is. But I'm telling you, if the game was exactly like real life, then yes, you could have exact one-to-one scaling tracks and it would work out great. But the game is not exactly like real life. So stop thinking that you can make these tracks exactly one-to-one scaling to the bike, because it's not exact. Either way, that's my opinion on it. Just wanted to kind of explain to some of you boys that are thinking the game needs this one-to-one scaling shit. Just remember the argument that you're basically making by saying that. You're basically saying that the game is exactly like real life dirt bike racing. That's what you're saying. There's no way around it. There's really not. There's just nothing you can, no other kind of argument you can really make out of that, because why else would you want the tracks to be exact? You may not have ever thought about it that way, but you should, because that's the real shit to it, bro. It really is. And you get used to whatever it is that you're riding on, right? Like if you're a full-blown pro in this game and you start riding on a track like this Wind SX track, you get off all those super small, easy scaling, newer RF tracks, and you get on a track like this for like 3 or 4 days, trust me, you're going to get to the point to where this shit feels just as realistic as any of that other shit did. I promise you. Yeah, when you first get on this, if you've been riding on that more one-to-one scaling shit and you first get back on this, you're going to be like, whoa, these triples are pretty big. Oh, man. This scaling's pretty big, dude. This finish line's a little bit big. But that's because you've gotten so used to that one-to-one scaling shit. I also think that's happened to a bunch of you amateur boys riding on a bunch of those, like, 2019 and 2020 outdoor tracks on MX Simulator. You've gotten so used to that not as much pre-made, right? That not as much roughness, not as much gnarly braking bumps going into the corners and shit. So it makes it easier to get around the track when you're an amateur or you're a beginner in the game. So you think you prefer a track like that more so than a 17 style outdoor track. Because when you get back on something like that where there's actual proper pre-made roughness, pre-made ruts and all that type of shit, you're like, whoa, it fucking wakes your ass up to actual motocross skill gap in this game on the first lap, right? Like, there's braking bumps on the first lap. You can't just go hauling ass around the whole track when you're a beginner in the game. You can't do that on 17 tracks. You can't do that on this Wind SX track. But you can do that on any of those RF tracks from like 2019 all the way to 2021. Just about every single one of those RF tracks, I'm telling you, you can be an amateur dude in the game. You can be a beginner 250 dude. You're going to be getting around them tracks pretty damn easily, pretty quick, because of the way they're made. Like, that's all there is to it, man. But either way, appreciate you guys watching all the videos. Later, dudes.